Mom married her new husband 2 weeks after he moved in and adopts his kids from other women, ignored me and made me babysit them. But in the end, karma hit her hard. Alright, so my mom had me when she was 18, fresh out of high school and totally unprepared. But hey, what teenager is ready to be a parent? My dad? Some guy she met in college? I never met him. And honestly, I'm not even sure he knows I exist. For years it was just me and my mom, bouncing around, figuring things out on our own. But here's the kicker. I didn't even know my grandparents existed until I was like 10 years old. Yeah, my mom didn't want to move back to her hometown or tell anyone about me. She just kept it all quiet, pretending like it was some kind of adventure, just the two of us against the world. And at first, I didn't question it. I thought it was normal to not have family around. But when I started school and saw other kids with their grandparents at events, it hit me. I didn't even know if I had grandparents. One day, out of nowhere, my mom says, "We're going to meet your grandparents." She said it so casually, like we were going to the grocery store or something. I was confused, obviously, because I had never even heard about these people before, and now we're just going to meet them? I asked her all these questions, like, why haven't we seen them before? And, are they nice? She didn't give me any answers, just kept saying, "You'll see." So we pack up our stuff and head to her hometown. It's this small town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business. My mom was clearly nervous, gripping the steering wheel like it was a lifeline, but I figured it was just the usual nerves. When we pull up to this old house, I'm staring at it, trying to picture who lives there. I'm wondering if these people are going to be like some fairy tale grandparents, super loving and warm, or if they're going to hate me for existing. You know, typical 10-year-old thoughts. Then my mom leans over and says, "I need you to do something for me." She lowers her voice like she's about to tell me a secret, and I'm all ears because, up to this point, she's been so weirdly quiet about the whole thing. She tells me that I'm going to be the one to introduce myself. I was supposed to say something like, "Hi, I'm your granddaughter," and do the whole sad puppy dog eyes routine. Now at this point, I'm a kid who just wants to make my mom happy, so I agree, even though I don't really understand what's happening. All I know is that my mom seems anxious, and I'd been trained by then to do whatever it took to keep things smooth between us. So we walk up to the door, and she's all smiles. But it's this forced smile that's kind of creepy when I think back on it. My grandparents answer the door, and I just blurt out, "Hi, I'm your granddaughter," like it's some big reveal. They stand there, stunned. It's awkward, really awkward. My mom is standing behind me, nudging me forward like I'm supposed to put on some kind of show. I can feel their eyes on me, scanning, trying to understand what they're even looking at. At this point, I realize they had no idea I existed. None. My grandma covers her mouth, and my grandpa just keeps staring. It's like they're trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. I start feeling weird, like maybe I'm intruding or something. But before I can react, my mom jumps in and tries to smooth it over with some fake laughs and a story about how she's been meaning to introduce us, but just hadn't gotten around to it. She goes on, and I'm just standing there, feeling like an outsider in my own family. She keeps telling them how great it's been, just her and me, and I'm listening, trying to figure out where this version of our life even came from. She talks like we've been living some fairy tale life, just me and her against the world. Meanwhile, I'm realizing more and more that I don't know anything about her past or why we've been on our own this whole time. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of awkward conversation, she drops the real reason we're there. She wants us to stay with them for a while. But instead of asking them herself, she nudges me and whispers, "Go on, ask them." So there I am, 10 years old, looking up at these strangers who just found out I exist, and I'm supposed to ask if we can live with them. I feel like I'm betraying them somehow, like I'm some pawn in this weird game my mom is playing, but I do it. I look at them with the biggest, saddest eyes I can manage, and ask if we can stay with them for just a little while. I even say it the way my mom coached me, making it sound like it's just this small favor, nothing major. My grandma's eyes tear up, and my grandpa looks at me with this softness I'd never really seen before. I could tell they didn't know what to say. They just stood there processing it all, and finally they agree. They say we can stay. And my mom? She's all smiles, acting like this was her plan all along, like she'd finally decided to reconnect with family or something. But I knew better. I could see it in her eyes that this wasn't about family. It was about her needing a place to crash. Living there was weird, to say the least. My mom made me keep up this charade, like I was some well-behaved kid from a stable family. But I felt like an outsider. I remember seeing old photos of my mom with her siblings and cousins on my grandparents' walls, and I'd stare at them, wondering why I was never in any of them, why I didn't know these people sooner. My grandparents tried to make me feel welcome, but I could tell they were thrown off by the whole situation. They'd ask me questions about school, about where we'd been living, and every time I'd start to answer, my mom would step in and change the subject. She didn't want them knowing much about our life. It was like she had this whole image she wanted to keep up, and I was just part of the performance. After a while, I started to see what my mom was really doing. She was using me to make this whole thing smoother for her. Every time I started feeling comfortable, she'd pull me back into her little web, reminding me that I needed to play nice and keep quiet about certain things. I felt like I was carrying her secrets on my shoulders, secrets I didn't even fully understand. Looking back, I don't know why I went along with it. Maybe I just wanted to keep the peace. Maybe I thought it'd be worth it if it meant I'd finally have family in my life. But I knew even then that this wasn't normal. This wasn't how family was supposed to be. So after we settled in with my grandparents, I thought things might get better, like maybe I'd get to have a normal family life. I figured my mom would change now that we were around people who actually cared about us. But that didn't happen. If anything, things got worse. My mom was always on edge around my grandparents, like she was trying too hard to fit in. She would act overly sweet and helpful, which was not her usual style. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started to realize that she was only putting on this show for my grandparents. Around them, she was the loving mom who was finally reconnecting with her family. But when we were alone, she'd snap back to her usual self, impatient, annoyed, and constantly busy with her own life. I started noticing it more when she started dating again. She'd met this guy, Mike, through some mutual friend, and he was all right, I guess. Nothing special, but my mom was all in, like she'd found her next big project. And that's the thing with my mom. Every guy she dated was like her new project. She'd throw herself into these relationships, giving them all her attention, like she was on some mission to make them work. For a while, it was just a casual thing, but then she started bringing Mike around to my grandparents' house. She'd act all lovey-dovey with him in front of everyone, laughing too loud and making a big deal out of every little thing he did. I could see my grandparents were a bit thrown off. I mean, we'd just shown up out of nowhere, and now she's dragging this guy into the mix. But they didn't say anything because they were trying to make this family thing work too. One time, I tried to talk to her about it. I didn't have much experience with relationships. I mean, I was only like 11 or 12. But I knew enough to see she was putting him first. Way above me. So I told her straight up, I don't think it's fair you're spending all this time with Mike. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her or something. Then she gave me this whole speech about how I needed to get on board and how she'd sacrificed so much to be my mom. I'd heard it all before. That whole "I gave up everything for you" line. I used to feel bad when she'd say it, like I was this burden she was stuck with. But that day, something clicked, and I just stopped feeling sorry. I didn't even respond. I just let her keep talking because I knew she wasn't going to listen to me anyway. She never did. From then on, I just started keeping my mouth shut. I knew better than to bring it up again, and I figured if she was happy pretending everything was perfect, fine. I'd let her pretend. But I couldn't shake this feeling that I was invisible. My mom would be out with Mike all the time, sometimes leaving me at my grandparents' place for days on end without even checking in. I was supposed to be her kid, but she was treating me like an afterthought, and every time she walked through the door, it was like I didn't even exist. What made it worse was how she'd use me whenever she needed to win Mike over. If he ever came around to visit, she'd parade me around, making me perform as this perfect daughter. She'd be like, "Oh, tell Mike about your school project," or "show him your piano piece," and it felt so fake. I was just this tool she used to impress him, like, "Look what a great mom I am." But as soon as he'd leave, I'd go back to being nobody. Then to top it all off, there was this one time she asked if I could help out by sharing a room with Mike's two kids if they ever came over. His kids were younger, maybe 5 or 6, and needed a lot of attention. My mom was just going on and on about how it would be good for me to have siblings and a bonding experience. But all I could think was, are you serious? She wanted me to squeeze into my own tiny space with 2 kids I barely knew, just to make her boyfriend feel more at home. I tried to push back, saying it wasn't fair, and she got mad. Really mad. She said I was being selfish, that I needed to grow up and understand that she needed a life too. She kept hammering in that same line about how much she'd sacrificed and how this was her chance at happiness. I'd never seen her so intense about anything. After that, I just gave up. I knew there was no point in arguing. She wasn't going to listen. I was tired of feeling like a burden, tired of trying to get her to see me as more than just some problem to deal with. So I did what she wanted. I shared a room with these random kids whenever they came over, and I pretended to be happy about it. I played the part, did the big sister thing because I figured it'd be easier than fighting her on it. But inside, I was just done. I'd lost any hope that she'd ever change. I kept my head down, went to school, did my homework, and tried to stay out of the way. I spent as much time as I could at my grandparents' house because honestly, it felt like the only place where I mattered. They'd ask me about my day, actually listen to my answers, and I started to feel normal. But every time I had to go back home to my mom, it was like walking back into this invisible role. I was there, but I wasn't. And it wasn't like my grandparents didn't notice. They saw how my mom acted. They'd ask me gentle questions like, "Are you happy here?" Or "Do you like Mike?" But I couldn't bring myself to tell them everything. I didn't want to drag them into it, and I was too used to keeping quiet. I just shrugged and gave short answers, hoping they wouldn't dig too deep. The worst part was that I could tell my grandparents felt guilty. They'd go out of their way to make sure I felt included, planning little trips or taking me out for ice cream, trying to make up for what my mom wasn't giving me. I appreciated it, but it only made me feel worse because I knew they shouldn't have to step in like that. They'd already raised their own kids. They shouldn't have to be raising me too. Looking back, I can't believe I let things go on like that. But when you're a kid, you just go along with whatever's in front of you, especially when it's all you've ever known. I didn't know how to stand up for myself, and honestly, I don't think I even knew I was allowed to. So I just kept my head down and did what was expected. It was right around this time that my mom's life took another big turn, as she called it. She'd been dating this new guy she met online. Let's call him Steve. They started chatting during that lockdown when everyone was stuck at home, and I guess things escalated pretty quickly between them. Before I knew it, she was calling him her soulmate and going on and on about how amazing he was. I didn't pay much attention at first, honestly. I'd seen this happen so many times before that it didn't even faze me anymore. But this time it was different. Within a year of dating online, she decided to pack us up and move into his place. I didn't get a say in it, of course. One day she just sat me down and said, "We're moving in with Steve." She said it like she just announced we were going on a weekend trip or something. There was no, "What do you think?" or "Are you okay with this?" Just a done deal. In 2 weeks, we packed up and moved into Steve's house, which was in another town, far enough that I'd have to change schools and start over. When we got there, it wasn't just Steve. Nope, Steve came with his own package. 3 kids, all under 10. So now suddenly, I'm living in this house with a bunch of strangers. Steve, his kids, and my mom, who was acting like she'd just won the lottery. She kept saying, "Isn't this great? We're finally a real family." But I didn't feel like part of it. I felt like an intruder in their happy little setup. The house itself was small, and with that many people crammed in, it felt even smaller. The kids were loud, constantly running around, yelling, and basically doing whatever they wanted. Steve wasn't much of a disciplinarian. He'd just laugh and tell them to calm down if they got too rowdy, but that was about it. My mom, on the other hand, was all about impressing him. She'd act like Supermom, helping his kids with their homework, playing with them, making them snacks. All the things she'd never done for me. I tried to stay out of the way as much as possible. I'd sit in my room, which I shared with Steve's youngest daughter, and just read or listen to music, anything to block out the noise. But no matter how much I tried to keep to myself, my mom always found a way to drag me back into the chaos. She'd make me play with Steve's kids, saying it was good bonding time, or she'd call me into the living room to help with chores while everyone else just relaxed. I was like a built-in babysitter, maid, an extra pair of hands for anything she needed. It didn't take long for me to realize that I was the outsider here. My mom had become more involved with Steve's kids than she'd ever been with me. They were younger, sure, and I guess in her mind, that meant they needed more attention, but it hurt. I was still her kid, wasn't I? But the way she acted around them, it was like she was trying to make up for something. She'd laugh and joke with them, do little things to make them happy, like tuck them into bed or help them with projects for school. I don't remember her ever doing that stuff for me. Then came the big surprise. A few weeks after we'd moved in, my mom gathered everyone in the living room, all excited, and announced that she and Steve were getting married. She was practically glowing, looking around at us like she'd just delivered the best news of our lives. Steve's kids were jumping up and down, cheering. Meanwhile, I just sat there, stunned. I hadn't even gotten used to living with these people, and now she was marrying him. This was going to be my life, like, forever? She looked over at me, probably noticing my lack of excitement, and gave me that "don't ruin this" look. I forced a smile, did the whole "wow, congratulations" thing, but inside I was just numb. All I could think about was how this felt more like her dream than mine. She'd always wanted that perfect family setup, and I guess she finally found it. But I didn't fit in here. I was just there, blending into the background while she was front and center, playing the role she'd always wanted. The wedding itself was weird. It was super low-key, just a quick ceremony in their backyard with a few of Steve's friends and some family. My mom didn't even invite my grandparents, which stung because they were the only family I felt connected to. I asked her why, and she shrugged it off, saying something about wanting to keep it intimate. I knew it was because she didn't want any reminders of her past life. She wanted this clean slate, her shiny new family, without anything that might mess up the picture she was trying to paint. After the wedding, things just got worse. With Steve's kids officially becoming her real family, my mom started treating me more like the live-in help than her daughter. She'd assign me chores, extra tasks around the house, saying it was only fair since we were all one big family now. But the only family part I saw was me doing more than my share of the work. Steve's kids? They got away with everything. If they made a mess, I'd be the one told to clean it up. If they didn't finish their homework, I'd get dragged in to help them. I was the unofficial fixer of everything they didn't feel like handling. I tried talking to my mom about it once. I sat her down and told her how I felt left out, like I didn't belong here. She listened for about 5 seconds before launching into a guilt trip about how I should be grateful for having a family, and how hard it was for her to make everything work. She made me feel like I was being selfish for even bringing it up. So, I let it go. What else was I supposed to do? Steve wasn't much better. He'd act polite enough around me, but I could tell he didn't really see me as part of the family either. To him, I was just my mom's baggage, someone who came along with the package deal. If I ever needed something, like help with schoolwork or even just a ride somewhere, he'd act annoyed, like I was asking for the world. But his kids? They got whatever they wanted, no questions asked. It was clear who the real family was in his eyes, and it definitely didn't include me. So, I adapted. I stopped asking for anything, stopped trying to be part of the family. I went through the motions, did my chores, kept my head down. I figured if I just stayed out of everyone's way, maybe things would be easier. My grandparents were the only ones who noticed something was off. They'd call and ask how things were going, and I'd always say, "It's fine." But I think they knew, deep down, that I was lying. Living there was like being a ghost in my own life. I was there, but I wasn't really seen. It was like the whole world was moving around me, with everyone else laughing, making memories, and living their lives, while I was just existing. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't a family. It was just a setup, a picture-perfect scene that looked great on the outside but felt hollow inside. I didn't know what to do about it, so I did nothing. I just kept going, day by day, hoping that maybe, somehow, things would change. But deep down, I was starting to accept that I'd always be second place, always the one on the sidelines, watching everyone else live the life that I was never really a part of. Living with my mom and her new family was like being in a constant cycle of frustration and feeling invisible. I thought it would get better over time, or that I'd eventually get used to it. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized that nothing was going to change. It wasn't just a phase or a transition period. This was my life now, and I was starting to feel trapped in it. That's when I began spending more time with my grandparents. At first, it was just weekends here and there, just to get a break from the chaos at home. But as time went on, it became my escape. My grandparents welcomed me with open arms every single time. They didn't ask me to be anything other than myself, and I didn't have to keep up some happy family act around them. They were just there for me. My grandma would make me breakfast, sit with me, and actually ask about my life, and not in that fake way that my mom did, where she was only half listening. My grandparents genuinely cared. My grandpa would ask about school, and I could tell he remembered details I'd told him from weeks before, which was something new for me. With my mom, I'd be lucky if she even remembered what grade I was in. I started to feel comfortable with my grandparents in a way I never did at home. I could breathe there. I didn't have to be the helper or the big sister or anything. I could just be me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I mattered. It felt like I actually belonged somewhere, and that feeling became addictive. I began dreading going back to my mom's house after each weekend. The contrast between the two places was just too much. One Sunday night, as my grandma was dropping me off at my mom's, she noticed I was quiet. She asked me if everything was all right, and I don't know what came over me. But I just started crying. I think I'd been holding it in for so long that the second someone genuinely asked, it all just poured out. I told her everything, how I felt like I was just a second thought, how my mom barely seemed to notice me unless she needed something, and how I felt more at home with them than I did in my actual house. My grandma listened without interrupting, which was new for me. When I finished, she just hugged me and told me that I was always welcome with them. She said that if I ever wanted to stay longer, I just had to let her know. She didn't push it, didn't make a big deal out of it. She just let me know I had options. That night, as I lay in bed back at my mom's, I couldn't stop thinking about what my grandma had said. I felt this weird mix of relief and guilt. The idea of living with my grandparents full-time sounded amazing, but at the same time, I felt bad for even considering it. Like, would I be abandoning my mom? Was it selfish? But then I thought about how she'd barely notice I was gone, and the guilt started to fade. Over the next few weeks, I kept going back and forth in my mind, trying to decide what to do. Every time I spent the weekend at my grandparents' house, it felt like the decision was already made. I was happier there. I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone's feelings or pretend to be part of a family I didn't feel connected to. And every time I went back to my mom's, the difference was glaring. Finally, one Friday afternoon, after a rough week at school and a particularly awkward dinner with my mom, Steve, and his kids, I decided I was done. I was done feeling like a stranger in my own home, done playing a part in this fake family picture. I wanted out. I didn't even pack much. I just threw a few things into my backpack, took a deep breath, and went to my mom. I told her straight up, I want to live with Grandma and Grandpa. She looked at me, stunned. At first, she thought I was joking, but when she realized I was serious, she went from surprised to annoyed. She started saying all the things I expected about how it was just a rough patch, how every family has issues, and how I needed to give it a real chance. I told her I'd given it more than a chance. I told her how I felt like I didn't belong, how she was more invested in Steve's kids than she'd ever been in me. She tried to deny it, saying that I was being dramatic, that I was imagining things, but I could see in her eyes that she knew I was right. Then came the guilt trip. She started talking about how hard she'd worked to give us a family, how much she'd sacrificed, and how I was making it harder for her by wanting to leave. She said I was being unfair, that I was running away instead of helping her build this new life. For a split second, I started to feel guilty again. But then I remembered all the times I'd been pushed aside, all the times I'd felt invisible, and I held firm. I'm sorry, I told her, but I need to be somewhere where I feel wanted. She tried one last time, saying that living with my grandparents wasn't the solution, that it wouldn't be the same as being with my real family. But I'd made up my mind. I told her I'd already talked to Grandma and Grandpa, and they were okay with it. She looked shocked, like she couldn't believe I'd gone that far without telling her. But what was I supposed to do? Wait around for her to care? Eventually, she just sighed and said, "Fine, if that's what you want." She made it sound like I was the one breaking up the family, like I was the problem. But by then, I'd stopped caring about what she thought. I just wanted to be somewhere that felt like home. So that was it. I grabbed my bag, called my grandparents, and within the hour, my grandma was there to pick me up. As I walked out of my mom's house, I felt this strange mix of sadness and relief. Part of me wished things could have been different, that my mom could have made me feel like I belonged. But the bigger part of me was just ready to leave. When I got to my grandparents' house, they didn't make a big fuss. They just hugged me, helped me unpack, and told me I could stay as long as I wanted. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, like I could finally breathe without constantly worrying about whether I was doing enough to earn someone's attention. That first night, lying in bed at my grandparents' house, I felt this weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just a part of someone else's life anymore, squeezed into a role that didn't fit me. I was starting to carve out my own place, where I didn't have to compete for anyone's attention or prove my worth. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was okay with that. I felt free. Living with my grandparents felt like I'd finally found what I'd been looking for all along, a real sense of home. There wasn't any forced happy family nonsense or playing pretend for anyone else. They were just there. They made me feel safe, and I knew I was genuinely welcome. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to walk on eggshells or earn my place in the house. At first, I thought my mom would come around, maybe even reach out to talk about everything that happened. Part of me expected she'd call, apologize, or at least ask how I was doing. But days went by, then weeks, and nothing. Not a single call, not a text, nothing. It was like I had vanished from her life as easily as I'd walked out the door. It hurt, even if I was trying to act like I didn't care. I couldn't help but feel like this confirmed what I'd known deep down all along. I was never her priority. My grandparents never brought her up, but I could tell they were waiting to see if she'd come around too. They'd glance at the phone when it rang, or my grandma would check her texts more often than usual. I guess they were hoping she'd come to her senses, just like I was. But she didn't. And over time, I just accepted it. I realized that I didn't need her approval to feel happy. Not anymore. Things at my grandparents' house just kept getting better. I was doing well in school, made some new friends, and got involved in things I actually enjoyed. My grandparents encouraged me to be myself in ways my mom never did. They didn't push me to act like the perfect daughter or big sister. They just wanted me to be happy. But of course, life isn't perfect. About 6 months after I moved in, I heard some news that made me realize just how little my mom had actually thought about me after I left. Apparently, she and Steve decided to adopt his kids, all 3 of them. They wanted to make the family official, and she was even throwing a big party to celebrate. I found out because one of my mom's old friends, who still kept in touch with my grandma, casually mentioned it. Hearing that stung, even if I tried to pretend it didn't. I mean, she couldn't be bothered to reach out to me, but she had all this energy to throw a party and celebrate her new official family. It was like I was just a ghost to her, someone who'd walked out and left no impact. I kept thinking, what did I do wrong? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't about me. This was her, always looking for something shiny and new, always ready to put other people ahead of me. My grandparents saw how much it hurt, even if I didn't say anything. My grandma pulled me aside one night, and she just sat with me in silence for a while. Finally, she said, "You didn't do anything wrong. Some people just don't know how to be there for the people who need them most." She didn't say it directly, but I knew she was talking about my mom. I knew she was right too, even if it still felt like a knife in the chest. As more time passed, I found myself moving on, little by little. My grandparents made sure I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared, and I focused on building a life for myself that didn't involve her. It was tough, especially around holidays or big events when you'd expect a parent to be there, but I'd already gotten used to not having her around for those things. In a weird way, it wasn't much different than how things were when I was actually living with her. And then, out of nowhere, karma hit her hard. One day, my grandma got a call from one of her friends. Apparently, things had gone south between my mom and Steve. Steve had lost his job, and without his income, they were struggling to make ends meet. It turned out he wasn't too great with money, and they'd been living beyond their means for a while. When he couldn't keep up with the bills, everything started to fall apart. My mom's perfect family was crumbling faster than she could fix it. But it didn't stop there. Soon after, Steve filed for divorce. And get this, he took his kids with him. He'd managed to get full custody, claiming that my mom wasn't capable of caring for them on her own. I don't know all the details, but from what I heard, she'd apparently done something to lose his trust, and he wanted nothing to do with her anymore. The kids she'd worked so hard to claim as her real family were gone, just like that. When I found out, I felt a weird mix of emotions. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part of me felt like she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. For so long, she'd put everything and everyone else ahead of me, and now she was left with nothing. I didn't feel happy about it exactly, but there was a kind of closure in knowing that she couldn't just push me aside and walk away without any consequences. She tried to reach out to me after that, of course. I got a few voicemails where she sounded upset, asking me to come by or at least call her back. But by then, I was done. I'd spent so much of my life trying to get her to care, trying to be enough for her, and it had never been enough. I wasn't about to go running back just because things had gone bad for her. I stayed with my grandparents, focusing on building the life I wanted, without her influence hanging over me. I was done being her backup plan, the person she could fall back on when her other relationships didn't work out. I had my own family now, people who actually saw me and cared about me for who I was, not for how I could fit into their life plan. Looking back, I don't regret my decision to leave. In fact, I wish I'd done it sooner. Living with my grandparents gave me a chance to finally be myself, to build a future that didn't revolve around trying to be what someone else wanted me to be. My mom had her chance to be a part of that, and she chose to focus on her own needs instead. That's on her, not me. Now I'm moving forward, finally free from the weight of trying to be someone else's perfect picture. I don't need her approval, her attention, or her validation anymore. I'm making my own way, and for the first time, I actually feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.